Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Pippa, Crerar and Harry Cole, with us from now until just before midnight, and welcome to both of you. So let's take a look, shall we, at the front pages. Yes, we can, spelt the French way, of course, is how the Metro reports the new deal signed between the UK and France to try to stem the massive increase in illegal migrants crossing the Channel. The Daily Mail, meanwhile, says that the migrant crisis is hitting nurses who are being forced out of hotel rooms to make way for asylum seekers. Looking ahead to Thursday's autumn statement, the Eye leads with a call from the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, for the Chancellor to raise taxes on big tech and non-domiciled tax exiles instead of punishing people on low pay. Pippa's paper, The Guardian, then hears from two leading Conservative local councils warning Mr Sunak that they could be forced into bankruptcy if their finances are put under any more pressure on Thursday. One measure we can expect, according to The Telegraph, is big increases in council tax, pushing average bills to more than £2,000 a year. But The Express says Mr Sunak will at least give pensioners the rise they're entitled to under the pensions triple lock. Well, the Mirror carries a warning from one leading pensions campaigner that if he doesn't, then pensioners will die. While the Times says the Chancellor will also give a boost to the living wage to help the low-paid and pensioners. The Financial Times pictures the US and Chinese presidents meeting at the G20 summit, but says tensions over China's attitude to Taiwan overshadowed any attempt to improve relations. Harry's paper, The Sun, has the latest fallout from footballer Cristiano Ronaldo's bombshell TV interview about his grievances with Manchester United, while the Star bemoans an apparent shortage of breakfast egg supplies being suffered by pub chain JD Wetherspoon. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head straight to our guests then, shall we? Pippa, Crerar and Harry Cole. And both of you, many of the newspapers looking ahead, obviously, to later this week. So, Pippa, let's kick off, shall we, with the Daily Telegraph, suggesting that households face a steep increase in council tax.
Yeah, this is a story which the Times reported today, that the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in his budget on Thursday, his autumn statement, is likely to scrap the cap on council tax rises without a local referendum. Currently, the situation is that councils are allowed to put up council tax to pay for social care beyond the 2.99%. Which includes the 1% care levy, but only if they have a referendum. And the suggestion in the Telegraph is that it could go as high as 5%, which would potentially add £100 or more onto the average Band D property's annual bill. And of course, for more expensive properties, it would go up even higher. There's been a lot of discussion about this in government as part of the broader measures under consideration for putting up taxes. We've heard, obviously, in recent days, lots about inheritance tax, about the capital gains tax, and what seems to be sort of the main driver, the main aspect here is freezing the threshold at which taxes go up, so that more people are brought in, so-called fiscal drag, more people are brought into paying a higher tax band as a result of inflation. So tax is likely to go up, as Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have warned, across the board. But the focus on councils in particular is really stark, because of course so much of their budgets do go on social care, whether it's for adults or children. I think top-tier councils, the average is about 70% of their budget. And because their overall budgets have been cut so much in the last decade, by up to 60% across local government, it's one of the areas that has been most hit by austerity in the years following, battered by the pandemic as well. And now, obviously, by rampant inflation, and they're really struggling to make ends meet. And they have, as well as obviously the social care costs, one of the ways that they are trying to make ends meet is by cutting back on services which they're legally obliged to provide, things like school buses, street lighting, refuse, libraries, and so on, which are sort of the day-to-day services that people expect from their councils. So not only are they likely to see in many areas an increase in council tax, but also see
Oh, lost the last bit of that. But anyway, we got the gist of the rest of it. Just quickly on this, Harry, because we've got so much to pack in of suggestions that might be in the autumn statement. Certainly the Telegraph suggesting that the Conservative Party manifesto in 2019 pledged to keep the veto on large council tax rises. But if we look at The Guardian, both papers suggesting why they need that flexibility to put money up. The Guardian suggesting they're going broke.
Yeah, I think you're going to start hearing a lot of warnings from town halls. Just seeing the start of them. 2 Tory councils there saying they're going to, they need more money. I understand there's been quite a stark warning coming from the local government association tomorrow or perhaps the next day. Laying out in exactly what terms they really do need to see council tax go up to meet their shortfalls. Now, add into that, these referendum sort of thresholds going up to make it harder to block council tax rises. Plus, now we know that the average household is probably going to be paying around £900 more next spring for their energy bills. Based on the price cap being the price cap going up and the support being phased out to targeting the neediest, plus all these thresholds for income tax being frozen, plus VAT thresholds being frozen. And you begin to see how Jeremy Hunt was able to say, actually, on Sunday, everyone will be paying more tax. It seems to me the vast majority of people, consumers, workers, will be paying more, but pensioners will be protected. Those on benefits will be protected, and we learn tomorrow that the minimum wage will go up. So you can see what they're trying to do. I wonder how far they'll be able to take Tory MPs along with it. Yes, they're protecting the most vulnerable in society. That is a good thing, but they're also clobbering middle-class earners, homeowners, and energy bill payers. So you wonder how politically astute it is that it feels like Tory voters are going to be the ones whacked the most.
Yeah, interesting. But I'm going to stay with you because this is a story you wrote. And Pippa, I know we're going to come to your story a bit later on as well. It wasn't long since we talked about defence having 3% of GDP. Now you've written that they're fighting £3 billion of cuts. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, so what they've done, and quite eloquently in Whitehall terms, is kick the can down the road, as they say. They're going to have the big row about future defence spending next year when they set the budgets for the years coming. Now, what they've done is Jeremy Hunt's made a big thing that pretty much all departments, except perhaps the NHS, will be ring-fenced to allow them to protect them from these cuts. Defence is obviously an incredibly politically toxic one to be looking at cutting. So it sounds like they've struck a late deal now to bend the rules. So Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is saying there's £3 billion hole in his budget because of inflation at a time of massively heightened national security. So the Treasury have come up this way that he'll be able to essentially dip into ring-fence money for other defence projects that don't need to be paid for yet, longer-term projects where the money's been earmarked for something, but he'll be able to borrow that money, bring it forward to cover his day-to-day costs to avoid having to do any cuts now. But eventually there will need to be an almighty row, another big settlement to meet the promises that the Defence Secretary, the Prime Minister, previous Prime Ministers have made to our NATO allies.
And Pippa, for once the Daily Express and the Daily Mirror singing from the same hymn sheet, the protection of pensioners, this idea of the triple lock. Many people point to the richer pensioner with these non-means tested help in many areas, plus the triple lock. So what are they both saying? Look out for older people. Daily Mirror going as far as saying they'll die.
Yeah, well, both of them obviously have an older readership, and therefore it's no surprise really that they're focusing on pensions. This comes obviously as Rishi Sunak had given his strongest hint yet that the government's going to protect the triple lock on pensions today. He said that pensioners will always be at the forefront of his mind. The pension triple lock, which as you'll remember was in the 2019 manifesto, promised to put up pensions to the highest out of inflation average earnings of 2.5%. Obviously, inflation is soaring at the moment, so they're likely to go up dramatically. And it's prompted a lot of discussion about where the burden's going to fall, because obviously it is working people currently who are likely, as Harry so eloquently describes, likely to put to bear the burden of the tax rises to pay for the pension rises of the elderly. And while it is true there's lots of pensioner poverty, it's also true that working households and families, children's poverty is proportionately much higher. So this is really going to be difficult for sort of the generational divide. However, I think it's fair to say that all political parties, the Conservatives in particular, rely on the older vote. Over 60s are more likely to vote Conservative, and over 60s are more likely to come out and vote at an election. So obviously the government will be wanting to keep that section of the electorate happy, even if, as Harry suggests, it's difficult to get past MPs who maybe are concerned about homeowners and working people being hit harder as a result. But obviously this is something which the government feels very strongly about. I think we're fully expecting the triple lock to be maintained. So I suspect that the Express and the Mirror in that regard at least will be happy come Thursday.
OK, lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including, in fact, your story, Pippa, too, on the front of The Guardian. Dominic Raab was warned about his behaviour on several occasions, and a letter tonight from civil servants to the Prime Minister. Back with that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, once again, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. Pippa, let's go to your story then, which is on the front page of The Guardian. Dominic Raab was warned about his behaviour, a story that's been rumbling for a couple of days. But what's the latest that you've found out?
So the latest is, this is the third department which we've heard about and written stories about after the Ministry of Justice and the Brexit department, now dissolved Brexit department. This is now when he was Foreign Secretary between, I think it was 2018 and 2020 he was there. And we've been told that the then Permanent Secretary, Simon MacDonald, was told by senior staff in Dominic Raab's private office about his behaviour, which they regarded as unacceptable and even bullying. However, they didn't want to put any formal complaints about him, because partly they feared for their careers, and secondly they felt that it was a real privilege to work in the department. And a department like the Foreign Office, which is often hit by crisis, they obviously felt that they were pretty tough and up to the job and that they could continue, but nevertheless they regarded it as bullying, to the extent that I'm told Simon MacDonald had to speak to Dominic Raab on several occasions about his behaviour and his the way he addressed staff and ran meetings and so on. And it got to the point where nothing changed. So I believe that informal complaints, so conversations, were had with the head of the Cabinet Office of Propriety and Ethics team, which is currently sort of the formal route through the ministerial standards process, was flagged with them. And I'm told that Dominic Raab's name was on a list. Although, of course, the defence that we've seen throughout all of this has been that no formal complaints have been made by civil servants. And that has been kind of, I think, how the government, each department, and of course Number 10, and of course the Prime Minister has responded to this. And it just feels to me that Rishi Sunak has constantly and repeatedly talked about integrity, professionalism and accountability at the top of every level of his government. And that sets a very high bar. It also really is sort of hostage to fortune, because if anyone is deemed to fall below that bar, then potentially they could be in trouble. So, I don't know whether anybody's going to put in a formal complaint, or whether anyone has put in a formal complaint about Dominic Raab's behaviour. But if they did, it could be quite tricky territory. But regardless, he's it's pretty difficult questions ongoing for Raab, who is of course up at PMQs or deputy PMQs against Angela Rayner in the Commons on Wednesday.
Yes, you couldn't make up the timing, could you? Quick comment on that, and in the light of this letter from the Union for Senior Civil Servants talking about this toxic work culture, impacting the ability to deliver good government and so on. This letter that's been written to the Prime Minister, is he safe, Harry? Do you think?
Yeah, look, I think he probably is, lest there some formal complaint that's being covered up emerges. Look, Dominic Raab has been around in Westminster for 10 years, even before he was an MP, 15 years, even before he was an MP. His sort of forthright work style, should we say, was the topic of much discussion, even when he was a sort of chief of staff to an opposition frontbencher. Look, this reputation has followed him around Whitehall wherever he's gone. It's clear that words had to be had. You wonder how much Sunak knew about that when he was reappointed, whether it was raised. You can obviously see the way the story's gone, that the Home Office tried to get, Home Office officials were trying to get rid of Suella. That didn't work. Gavin Williams, and obviously his past came up to catch him, quite rightly, I think, in some of the things that he'd said. Whether we've seen anything so far that warrants perhaps resignation from Dominic Raab. I don't think so. I mean, the fit of pique of throwing a tomato across his desk doesn't reads more like the thick of it than anything else. That said, look, Dave Penman, he's an activist. He is a union leader. He's very good at getting his name in the papers, jumping on a bandwagon and banging a drum as and when he wants to, and he's doing his job.
Harry?
And God bless him for it.